Hello everyone and welcome to another Dark Ground video. In this video we will be delving into the crimes and into the casebook of Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, so stay tuned. Hello everyone and welcome to another Dark Ground video. In this video, as you heard from the intro, we'll be delving into the serial killer casebooks once more and delving into the crimes, the notorious crimes of the notorious American serial killer known as the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. Now, before I get into this video, I just want to say, if you like the content of this video, then be sure to make sure to subscribe and like the video, and to check out all the other videos we have on the channel or in the Dark Ground series. So without further ado, Ricardo Leyva Munoz Ramirez, known as Richard Ramirez, was an American serial killer, serial rapist, kidnapper, paedophile and burglar. And his highly publicized home invasion and murder crime spree terrorized the residents of the greater Los Angeles area and later the residents of the San Francisco Bay Area from June 1984 until 1985. Prior to his capture, Ramirez was dubbed the Valley Intruder, as his attacks were first clustered in the San Gabriel Valley, and the Night Stalker by the news media. So he used a variety of weapons including handguns, knives, a machete, a tire iron and a hammer, as well as satanic imagery. So let's get into a bit of his early life. So Ramirez was born in El Paso, Texas on February the 29th, 1960. He was the youngest of Julian and Mercedes Ramirez's 5 children. His father, Julian, a Mexican national and former Ciudad Juarez policeman who later became a laborer on the Atchison, Topeka and Santa Fe Railway, was prone to fits of anger, and that often resulted in physical abuse. As a 12-year-old, Richard, or Richie as he was known to his family, was strongly influenced by his older cousin, Miguel Mike Ramirez, a decorated Green Beret combat veteran who often boasted of his gruesome exploits and abuses during the Vietnam War. He shared Polaroid photos of his victims, including Vietnamese women he had raped. In some of the photos, Mike posed with the severed heads of a woman he had abused. Richard, who had begun smoking marijuana at the age of 10, bonded with Mike over joints and gory war stories. Mike taught his young cousin some of his military skills, such as killing with stealth. Around this time, Ramirez began to seek escape from his father's violent temper by sleeping in a local cemetery. Richard was present on May 4th, 1973, when his cousin Mike fatally shot his wife Jessie in the face with a .38 caliber revolver during a domestic argument. After the shooting, Richard became sullen and withdrawn from his family and peers. Later that year, Richard moved in with his older sister Ruth and her husband Roberto, an obsessive peeping Tom who took Richie along on his nocturnal exploits. Ramirez also began using LSD and cultivated an interest in Satanism. Mike was found not guilty of Jessie's murder by reason of insanity and was released in 1977 after 4 years of incarceration at the Texas Mental Hospital. His influence over Ramirez continued. The adolescent Ramirez began to meld his burgeoning sexual fantasies with violence, including forced bondage and rape. While still in school, he took a job at a local Holiday Inn where he used his passkey to rob sleeping patrons. His employment ended abruptly after Ramirez attempted to rape a woman in her hotel room before her husband returned to find them. Although the husband beat Ramirez senseless at the scene, criminal charges were dropped when the couple who lived out of state declined to return to testify against him. And Ramirez dropped out of Jefferson High School in the 9th grade at the age of 22. He moved to California, where he settled permanently. So we get on to his murders. On April the 10th, 1984, Richard Ramirez murdered 9-year-old Chinese American Mei Lueng in the basement of the hotel where he was living in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. He raped and beat the girl before stabbing her to death and hanging her body from a pipe. This, Ramirez's first known killing, was not identified as being connected to the subsequent crime spree until 2009, when Ramirez's DNA was matched to a sample obtained at the crime scene. In 2016, officials disclosed evidence of a second suspect identified through a DNA sample retrieved from the scene, who is believed to have been present at Lueng's murder. Authorities have not publicly identified the suspect, described as being juvenile at the time, and not brought charges due to the lack of evidence. So, on the June 28, 1984, 79-year-old Jenny Vincal was found brutally murdered in her apartment in Glassell Park, Los Angeles. She had been stabbed repeatedly while asleep in her bed, and her throat slashed so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. Ramirez's fingerprint was found on a mesh screen he removed to gain access through an open window. On March 17, 1985, Ramirez attacked 22-year-old Maria Hernandez outside her home in Rosemead, California, shooting her in the face with a .22 caliber handgun after she pulled into her garage. She survived when the bullet ricocheted off the keys she held in her hands as she lifted them to protect herself. Inside the house, her roommate, Dale Yoshi Okazaki, aged 34, heard the gunshot and ducked behind the counter when she saw Ramirez enter the kitchen. When she raised her head, he shot her once in the forehead, killing her. Within an hour of the Rosemead home invasion, Ramirez pulled 30-year-old Tsai Lian Veronica Yu out of her car in Monterey Park, shot her twice with a .22 caliber handgun, and fled. She was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. The two murders, and attempted third in a single day, attracted extensive coverage from news media, who dubbed the attacker, described as curly-haired, with bulging eyes, wide-spaced, rotting teeth, the walking killer and the valley intruder. On March the 27th, 1985, Ramirez entered a home that he had burglarized a year earlier just outside of Whittier, California, at approximately 2 a.m. and killed the sleeping Vincent Charles Zazara, aged 64, with a gunshot to his head from a .22 caliber handgun. Zazara's wife, Maxine Lavinia Zazara, aged 44, was awakened by the gunshot, and Ramirez beat her and bound her hands while demanding to know where her vulnerables were. While he ransacked the room, Maxine escaped her bonds and retrieved a shotgun from under the bed, which was not loaded. The infuriated Ramirez shot her 3 times with the .22, then fetched a large carving knife from the kitchen. He mutilated her body by stabbing her several times, then gouged out her eyes and placed them in a jewelry box, which he then left with. The autopsy determined that the mutilations were post-mortem. Vincent and Maxine's body were discovered by their son Peter. Ramirez left footprints from a pair of Avia sneakers in the flower beds, which the police photographed and cast. This was virtually the only evidence that the police had at the time. Bullets found at the scene were matched to those found at previous attacks, and the police determined that a serial killer was at large. On May the 14th, 1985, Ramirez returned to Monterey Park and entered the home of Bill Doy, aged 66, and his disabled wife, Lillian, aged 56. Surprising Doy in his bedroom, Ramirez shot him in the face with a .22 semi-automatic pistol as Doy went for his own handgun. After beating the mortally wounded man into unconsciousness, Ramirez entered Lillian's bedroom, bound her with thumb cuffs, then raped her after he had ransacked the home for valuables. Bill Doy died of his injuries while in the hospital. On the night of May 29th, 1985, Ramirez drove a stolen car to Monrovia and stopped at the house of Mabel May Bell, aged 83, and her disabled sister, Florence Nettie Lang, aged 81. Finding a hammer in the kitchen, he bludgeoned and bound Lang in her bed, then bound and bludgeoned Bell before using an electrical cord to shock the woman. After raping Lang, he used Bell's lipstick to draw the satanic pentagram symbol on her thigh, as well as the walls of both bedrooms. The women were found 2 days later alive but comatose. Bell later died of her injuries. The next day, Ramirez drove the same car to Burbank and sneaked into the home of Carol Kyle, aged 42. At gunpoint, he bound Kyle and her 11-year-old son with handcuffs, then ransacked the house. He released Kyle to direct him to where the family's valuables were. He then raped her repeatedly. Ramirez also repeatedly ordered her not to look at him, telling her at one point that he would cut her eyes out. He fled the scene after retrieving the child from the closet, binding the two together again with handcuffs. On the night of July 2nd, 1985, he drove a stolen car to Arcadia and randomly selected the house of Mary Louise Cannon, aged 75, a widowed grandmother. After quietly entering Cannon's home, he found her asleep in her bed. He bludgeoned her into unconsciousness with a lamp and then repeatedly stabbed her using a 10-inch butcher blade from her kitchen. She was found dead at the scene. On July 5th, 1985, Ramirez broke into a home in Sierra Madre and bludgeoned 16-year-old Whitney Bennett with a tie iron as she slept in her bedroom. After searching in vain for a knife in the kitchen, Ramirez attempted to strangle the girl with a telephone cord. He stated that he was startled to see electrical sparks emanating from the cord when his victim began to breathe. And when his victim began to breathe, he fled the house, believing that Jesus Christ had intervened and saved her. Bennett survived the savage beating, although 478 stitches were required to close the lacerations to her scalp. On July 7th, 1985, Ramirez burglarized the home of Joyce Lucille Nelson, aged 61, in Monterey Park. Finding her asleep on her living room couch, he beat her to death by using his fists and kicking her in the head. A shoe print from an Avia sneaker was left imprinted on her face. After cruising 2 neighborhoods, he returned to Monterey Park and chose the home of Sophie Dickman, aged 63. Ramirez assaulted and handcuffed Dickman at gunpoint, attempted to rape her, and stole her jewelry. When she swore to him that he had taken everything of value, he told her to swear on Satan. On July 20th, 1985, Ramirez purchased a machete before driving a stolen Toyota to Glendale, California. He chose the home of Leila Nading, aged 66, and her husband, Maxon, aged 68. He burst into the sleeping couple's bedroom and hacked them with the machete, then killed them with shots to the head from a .22 caliber handgun. He further mutilated their bodies with the machete before robbing the house of valuables. After quickly fencing the stolen items from the Needing residence, Ramirez drove to Sun Valley. At approximately 15 a.m., he broke into the home of the Kavanaugh family. He shot the sleeping Shanarong Kavanaugh in the head with a .25 caliber handgun, killing him repeatedly. Then repeatedly raped and beat Somkid Kavanaugh. He bound the couple's terrified 8-year-old son before dragging Somkid around the house to reveal the location of any valuable items which he stole. During his assault, he demanded that she swear to Satan that she was not hiding any money from him. On August 6, 1985, Ramirez drove to Northridge and broke into the home of Chris and Virginia Peterson. He crept into the bedroom, startled Virginia, aged 27, and shot her in the face with a .25 caliber semi-automatic handgun. He then shot Chris in the neck and attempted to flee. Chris fought back while avoiding being hit by 2 more shots. During the struggle before Ramirez managed to escape, the couple survived their injuries. On August 8, 1985, Ramirez drove a stolen car to Diamond Bar, California, and chose the home of Sakina Abuath, aged 27, and her husband, Elias Abuath, aged 31. Sometime after 2:30 a.m., he entered the home and went into the master bedroom. He instantly killed the sleeping Elias with a shot to the head from a .25 caliber handgun. He handcuffed and beat Sakina while forcing her to reveal the location of the family's jewelry and then brutally raped her. He repeatedly demanded that she swear on Satan that she would not scream during his assaults. When the couple's 3-year-old son entered the bedroom, Ramirez tied the child up and then continued to rape Sakina. After Ramirez left the home, Sakina untied her son and sent him to the neighbors for help. Ramirez, who had been following the media coverage of his crimes, left Los Angeles and headed to San Francisco. On August 18, 1985, he entered the home of Peter and Barbara Pan. He shot the sleeping Peter, aged 66, in the temple with a .55 caliber handgun. He then beat and sexually assaulted Barbara, aged 62, before shooting her in the head and leaving her for dead. At the crime scene, Ramirez used lipstick to scrawl a pentagram and the phrase "Jack the Knife" on the bedroom wall. When it was discovered that the ballistics and shoe print evidence from the Los Angeles crime scenes matched the Pan crime, San Francisco's then Mayor Dianne Feinstein divulged the information in a televised press conference. The leak infuriated the detectives in the case, as they knew the killer would be following media coverage, which gave him opportunity to destroy crucial forensic evidence. Ramirez, who had indeed been watching the press, dropped his size 11.5 Avia sneakers over the side of the Golden Gate Bridge that night. He remained in the area for few more days before heading back to the Los Angeles area. On August 24, 1985, Ramirez traveled 76 miles south of Los Angeles in a stolen orange Toyota to Mission Viejo. That night, he arrived at the home of James Romero Jr., who had just returned from a family vacation to Rosarito Beach in Mexico. Romero's son, 13-year-old James Romero III, happened to be awake and heard Ramirez's footsteps outside the house. Thinking there was a prowler, James meant to wake his parents, and Ramirez fled the scene. James raced outside and noticed the colour, make and style of the car, as well as a partial license plate number. Romero contacted the police with the information, believing James had chased away a thief. After the encounter, Ramirez broke into the house of Bill Carnes, aged 30, and his fiancée, Inez Erickson, aged 29. Through a back door, Ramirez entered the sleeping couple's bedroom and awakened Carnes when he cocked his .25 caliber handgun. He shot Carnes 3 times in the head before turning his attention to Erickson. Ramirez told the terrified woman that he was the Night Stalker and forced her to swear she loved Satan as he beat her with his fists and bound her with the neckties from the closet. After stealing what he could find, Ramirez dragged Erickson to another room before raping her. He then demanded cash and more jewelry and made her swear on Satan there was no more. Before leaving the home, Ramirez told Erickson, "Tell them the Night Stalker was here." Erickson untied herself and went to a neighbor's house to get help for her severely injured fiancé. Surgeons removed 2 of the bullets from his head and he survived his injuries. Erickson gave a detailed description of the assailant to investigators, and police obtained a cast of Ramirez's footprint from the Romero house. The stolen car was found abandoned on August 28th in Wilshire Center, Los Angeles, and police obtained a single fingerprint from the rearview mirror, despite Ramirez's careful efforts to wipe the car clean of his prints. The print was positively identified as belonging to Ramirez, who was described as a 25-year-old drifter from Texas, with a long rap sheet that included many arrests for traffic and illegal drug violations. On the 29th of August 1985, law enforcement officials decided to release a mugshot of Ramirez from a 1984 arrest for Grand Theft Auto to the media, and the Night Stalker finally had a face. At the press conference, it was announced, "We know who you are now, and soon everyone else will. There will be no place you can hide." So, other suspected victims. On the night of June 27th, 1985, 32-year-old Patty Elaine Higgins was murdered in her Arcadia home. The crime was not discovered until July 2nd, when she did not show up for work. Her attacker had sodomized her, strangled her, and slashed her throat. Ramirez was charged with murder and burglary in relation to Higgins' murder. However, the charges against him in the case were eventually dropped due to a lack of concrete physical evidence linking the Higgins murder to the Night Stalker crimes. So, on August 30th, 1985, Ramirez took a bus to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother, unaware that he had become the lead story in virtually every major newspaper and television news program across California. After failing to meet his brother, he returned to Los Angeles early on the morning of August 31st. He walked past police officers who were staking out the bus terminal in hopes of catching the killer should he attempt to flee on an outbound bus and into a convenience store into East Los Angeles. After noticing a group of elderly Mexican women fearfully identifying him as El Matador, the killer, Ramirez saw his face on the front pages on the newspaper rack and fled the store in a panic. After running across the Santa Ana freeway, he attempted to carjack a woman but was chased away by bystanders who pursued him. After hopping over several fences and attempting 2 more carjackings, he was eventually subdued by a group of residents, one of whom had struck him over the head with a metal bar in the pursuit. The group held Ramirez down and relentlessly beat him until the police arrived and took him into custody. So, on September the 20th, 1989, Ramirez was convicted of all charges: 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. During the death penalty phase of the trial on November the 7th, 1989, he was sentenced to die in California's gas chamber. He stated to reporters after the death sentences, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." The trial cost $1.8 million, $3.71 million in 2019 dollars, which at the time made it the most expensive in the history of California, until surpassed by the O.J. Simpson murder case in 1994. Now, the murderous life of Richard Ramirez came to an end on July the 7th, 2013, due to complications from secondary to B-cell lymphoma at the Marine General Hospital in Green Bay, California. He had also been affected by chronic substance abuse and chronic hepatitis C viral infection. At 53 years old, he had been on death row for more than 23 years. By some estimates, he would have been in his early 70s before his execution was carried out due to California's lengthy appeal processes. And that brings to a close the casebook and the life of the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. As a side note, and an interesting note, there is a documentary on Netflix about Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, which I highly recommend you go and watch to know more about this individual. And on that note, this Dark Ground video comes to a close. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our other videos here in the Dark Ground series, and of course on the Middle Ground channel. And with that being said, don't have nightmares, and remember, what's under the bed is not the only thing that you should be scared of. Until next time, see ya.